Chipies Ecosystem, the Humanity Regenerative Sanctuary Ecosystem. For decades, humanity has documented a quiet decay, miseries, tears among families, and a systemic vulnerability that forces billions to beg for their very survival. We have watched value extracted, centralized, and guarded behind commissions, custom structures, and endless bureaucracy. But the truest tragedy, we have accepted these abnormalities as the natural order of life. We ask ourselves, why should 90% of our world exist in perpetual suffering while the architecture of society screens who is allowed to live well and who is born to merely endure? What if value was decentralized worldwide? What if the whole globe could coordinate to build together, ensuring that everyone flourishes, regardless of background, origin, or privilege? Life cannot be about begging for your life, signing one restrictive form after another, or existing inside technologies designed only to reap your essence. Inside every person is a child that deserves to play, to explore, and to arrive on this earth with the absolute certainty that they will thrive. Without begging, without blind trust, without compromise. This is why we built the Chipies Ecosystem, a regenerative sanctuary ecosystem engineered to help humanity become fully independent, self-sustaining, and collectively coordinated across generations. Built with no single point of failure and no centralized control, this global home stands firmly on three unbreakable backbones: company creatorship, opening the way for every single human to actively steer the kind of world that benefits us all; company ownership, a permissionless, global mechanism enabling millions to own the value they build, distributing prosperity straight to the individual; and stewardship, the sacred duty of governance, guaranteeing that every single subsystem is designed purely to elevate the quality of life for its co-owners. All of this runs on Cosmo Create, the trustless protocol that provides the verifiable, transparent framework for all humanity to build together. This is a world with no users, no customers, only company creators, company owners, and stewards. The faster we coordinate, the faster we secure a future where human civilizations thrive permanently. This is the end game for the future of humanity. This is Chipies Ecosystem, the Humanity Regenerative Sanctuary. Welcome home.
Okay, Chipies Economics. So now we have understood what Chipies ecosystem is all about as a regenerative sanctuary ecosystem for humanity. Now we want to go deep into the designs of everything that happens in Chipies ecosystem. So Chipies Economics. So Chipies Economics defines how value is created, owned, distributed, and sustained across the entire Chipies ecosystem. So it is the economic operating system of Chipies ecosystem. It is the framework for designing ownership. It is the framework for designing incentives and value distribution. So Chipies Economics is a system that aligns participation, contribution, and rewards. It is actually a structure for coordinating co-owners, co-creators, and stewards, and a mechanism for creating a self-sustaining economic system. So we said that Chipies ecosystem wants to achieve this self-sustaining interface of life, right? So it is through these economics that Chipies ecosystem achieve that architecture. So we'll see how. So Chipies economics is actually a mathematically enforced economic model powered by the Cosmocrate. So you can't separate the Cosmocrate with Chipies economics. So we'll see how that whole process actually works. So at the same time, Chipies economics is the foundation for a regenerative value creation and contribution, and an economic layer that enables Chipies ecosystem to function and grow. Okay, now let's see why economic designs matter in Chipies ecosystem. So every subsystem in Chipies ecosystem is ultimately an economic system. So anything that we can think of that operates in Chipies ecosystem, it operates with economic designs. So Chipies economics. So economic designs determine whether a subsystem grows, sustains itself, distributes value fairly, and remains aligned with its mission over lifetime. Right? So basically, here is why economic designs matter in Chipies ecosystem, because they define how value is created, they define how ownership is distributed, they define how incentives are aligned, and they define how rewards are allocated. So basically, through economic designs, participation is encouraged and incentivized. At the same time, economic designs enable for self-sustaining subsystems within an ecosystem. They actually define how co-owners, co-creators, and stewards interact, how regenerative yields are generated and distributed, and how they actually enable every subsystem or enablement to operate and evolve. Basically, Economic designs provide the mathematical clarity of everything that happens in the ecosystem instead of subjective interpretation. So basically, they transform missions into enforceable economic systems. So if Cosmocrate is the infrastructure on which the entire Chipies ecosystem operates, economic designs are the rules that determines how value is created, how it is owned, how it is distributed, how sustainability itself is achieved within the ecosystem. So that's why economic designs matter in Chipies ecosystem. So now let's look on the core components of Chipies economic design. So basically, economic designs within Chipies ecosystem can be categorized into these few examples, right? But basically, we are looking forward to see different forms of economic designs emerging within Chipies ecosystem, because we want to achieve or to coordinate the whole world to come together to actually achieve a self-sustaining life architecture. So we are looking forward to see humanity pathing in many ways, but towards one direction. You get the sense? So basically, economic designs can be in form of incentives, can be in form of rules, can be in form of ownership, can be in form of distribution, can be in form of verification, can be in form of mathematical enforcement. So let's see, when an economic design is an incentive, what does this mean? This means it defines what behavior, what contribution, or how outcomes are rewarded from a specific subsystem or a contract that represents that subsystem or enablement within the ecosystem. Then if an economic design is a rule, that set of rules actually defines how the economic system operates and evolves. If that economic design of a specific subsystem relates to ownership, it is actually defining how one owns value and how ownership is allocated. Then if it actually relates to distribution, it defines how rewards, yields, and value are actually shared. And if it actually relates to verification, it defines how participation, ownership, and outcomes are verified. And mathematical enforcement actually defines how rules and distributions are automatically enforced through smart contracts. So you will get to understand smart contract technologies as we move further in this discussion. So now let's look on, okay, we have been talking economic designs, Chipies economic designs, etc. Now let's look on how these economic designs are deployed within Chipies ecosystem. The first important step in designing any economic design in Chipies ecosystem is co-creatorship. So co-creatorship is all about coming up with a mission or identifying a problem or opportunity and getting it to be aligned through co-creatorship consensus mechanism within Chipies ecosystem. Then secondly, economic design creation. This involves coming up with ownership, how ownership is going to be aligned, how incentives are going to be aligned, how rules are going to be aligned, and how distribution mechanisms are going to be designed. So that is economic design creation. Then the third step after designing an economic design, then we go on the Cosmocrate protocol and deploy a smart contract. So a smart contract is basically an encoded self-executing computer program that runs on itself without no middleman. So you can think it is an institution that runs without any central control or a boss in between, right? So we go and deploy a contract that will execute that subsystem. Okay, remembering that a subsystem operating on the ground is a contract operating on the protocol. Okay, then the fourth stage is activation. So the economic design goes live and begins coordinating value creation, ownership, and incentive distribution across the world. Once deployed, we are saying it's no longer controlled by anyone. This implies it becomes activated and ready to be owned by anyone across the world. Then the fifth stage is verification layer. In Chipies ecosystem, the very most important thing to not to ignore is we literally don't trust each other. This is why we use trustless technologies within the ecosystem, right? So rules verification layer includes the verification of rules, whether the rules that we agreed as a community has been enforced as we agreed, whether ownership is actually as we agreed, whether participation distributions are operating transparently. All those kind of things should be verifiable, getting the truth about anything without having to ask anyone. Then mass ownership without superpowers. Yes. So once something is deployed on the protocol, once something is activated and mathematically enforced, anyone anywhere can now co-own without the need for permission from anyone, right? Now, let's look on Chipies co-ownership economic structures, right? So we have examples of ownership structures that determines who owns the subsystem and how ownership is distributed among co-owners, right? Then we have incentive structures that define how participation, contributions, and economic growth are rewarded. We have yield distribution that determines how generated value, revenues, yields flows back to co-owners. So yield distribution is about how the co-owners of a specific subsystem are going to live over lifetime. Then we have value allocation that determines how value is allocated between growth, sustainability, operations, and co-owners within the ecosystem. So co-ownership structures plus incentive structures plus yield distribution plus value allocation equals to a sustainable co-ownership economy within the ecosystem, right? Okay, next. So Chipies ecosystem wants to achieve a self-sustaining infrastructure. But now let's understand, let's move from being theoretical to practical. So now let's see how mathematical enforcement and verifications actually work within the ecosystem, right? So this is a bit technical explanation to Chipies Economic Designs. So smart contracts. So smart contracts, we discussed it earlier and said these are just self-executing encoded programs, right? So these smart contracts basically contain economic rules that are encoded into self-executing contracts, right? Then we have on-chain verification. Every economic design can be proven, can be verifiable. It is a proof that lives on chain, right? So all the verification lives on chain with no one who can edit or mute any economic design that has been implemented through co-creatorship. Then automated execution. So economic actions are executed through smart contracts according to predefined rules. Then transparent distribution. Value, rewards, yields are distributed transparently and verifiable. So we are only saying with mathematical enforcement and verification of economic designs, we are just saying we want to achieve a trustless economic enforcement. But how do we achieve this a trustless economic enforcement when we don't trust a person who is in between us, whether he is playing scams or bad deals, etc., all those kind of things? So this is why Chipies ecosystem uses these advanced smart contract technologies to make sure that everything is decentralized, everything is mathematically enforced, verifiable on chain, and transparent to everyone, getting to know anything without having to ask anyone. Okay, next. So let's see on the examples of common Chipies economic design patterns. So when we look or when we are in the ecosystem, right, economic designs differ. They differ how? They differ depending on the subsystem or on co-creatorship, on how individuals or co-owners of a specific subsystem want to live, how they imagine life benefiting them, how do they actually imagine the world progressing, how do they actually imagine future civilizations living. So we can actually have this kind of revenue sharing models of economic designs where we say we distribute a portion of generated revenue to all subsystem or co-owners. So basically this kind of a subsystem is looking forward to meet the financial needs of its co-owners. Then basically we can have this kind of yield sharing. So yield sharing basically involves systems like, for example, we are in agriculture and generally we don't care about having money, etc. We care about being able to feed our families. So we can have this kind of contribution rewards where we say you contributed, then you actually gain this after contributing. We can actually have asset ownership, which actually allows for collective ownership of productive assets and value generating systems within a specific subsystem. We can actually have regenerative incentive, which actually reward actions that strengthen, sustain, and actually grow the ecosystem. We can actually have stewardship incentives that rewards participation in governance, decision making, and economic design. So all these economic designs, they create different behaviors, incentive, economic structures, and value distribution within the ecosystem or a specific subsystems, but with the goal of achieving a self-sustaining architecture in order to achieve a sanctuary ecosystem for every human on earth. This is what we are trying to achieve, but taking different pathways. So there can be 1,000 subsystems within Chipies ecosystem, all experimenting different pathways, but with the goal to achieve a self-sustaining architecture for humanity. Okay, now let's see. Okay, we have been talking about these economic designs, talking about different economic, okay, now let's look on the practicality of all these economic designs. So within Chipies ecosystem, right? But before we dive into these use cases, right, we just provided two examples to economic designs, how they basically operate, right? Okay, but the core principle is to become a co-owner of an enablement or subsystem within Chipies ecosystem, you must hold co-ownership value balance associated with the economic design of that subsystem. You get the sense? So the economic design, basically, it is the one that determines how ownership, incentives, distributions, yields, rewards are basically operates. So basically, let's look on this example, financial enablement distribution design. We say the designs, they differ, but we want to just look on this, which is looking forward to meet the financial needs of its co-owners, right? So let's just assume that it is an enablement X, which is providing product Y. Let's just say this is a company, right? So economic design, so let's just say on its economic design, which has been co-created by co-creators, let's just assume that the contract representing this subsystem is actually holding a total co-ownership capacity of 50,000 co-ownership units. Then available co-ownership supply, which has been minted on that contract to be owned by people, let's just say it's co-ownership value balance total supply of 500, and the 500 is looking forward to raise something like 10,000, right? Fully diluted value capacity of that in USD. So what happens is on value distribution of that economic design, we are assuming that it is saying 60% of monthly revenue is distributed to co-owners. And let's just assume that you are a co-owner of this. Your position in this, you are holding co-ownership value balance of 3. So we are in the month of May. So we want to look on how value is going to be distributed. So we will say for the month of May, revenue pool is holding 20,000. Then distribution pool of our economic design is saying 60% to co-owners. So you are holding co-ownership value balance of 3, and co-ownership value balance of 1 for the month of May is equals to 500. This means for the month of May, you are getting 1,500 because co-ownership value balance of 1 is representing 500, and you are holding co-ownership value balance of 3, which means 500 times 3, which is 1,500. So an important key insight here is the co-ownership value balance remain constant over your lifetime, and you can actually co-own any co-ownership value balance permissionlessly. What differs is the value that has been generated by the subsystem which you co-own over a specific month. So we are saying a company is a real company. It actually enters profits, it actually enters losses, etc., all those kind of things. But what does not change over a lifetime is your co-ownership value balance. Okay, let's see another example. Okay, let's take this as a farming society, which is actually not looking forward to meet yields, not looking forward to meet financial needs, but basically yields. So the yields that are coming from this farm are going to be distributed to the co-owners. But these co-owners are everywhere. So what happens is these co-owners are holding co-ownership value balance. Don't actually forget about this, because it is the most important thing in Chipies ecosystem, co-ownership value balance. So okay, let's just assume that economic agricultural yields are the ones that are distributed to co-owners, and ownership determines entitlements to production yields, right? So what happens is, let's assume that you are holding co-ownership value balance of 5. So monthly harvest is equals to 50,000 tons of maize, and co-ownership value balance of 1 is equals to 4 tons. This implies you, who is holding co-ownership value balance of 5, you are going to receive 20 tons of maize, because co-ownership value balance of 1 equals to 4 tons, and you, who is holding co-ownership value balance of 5, you are going to get 20 tons. So basically, as you are seeing, the previous one was a financial enablement. This one is a yield sharing design. So basically, instead of only receiving monetary rewards in Chipies ecosystem, co-owners basically receive different incentives depending on the objective, missions, visions of that subsystem, but all with the goal to meet a sanctuary design ecosystem. So the core idea behind the Chipies Economic Designs is we can actually have financial enablements, yields, distributions, etc. We can actually have the infrastructure subsystems which may distribute utility access, all those kind of things. But the economic design is the one that determines how ownership translates into real-world benefits for co-owners. Basically, it is also in turn affected by co-creatorship. So co-ownership is not tied to a single reward model or co-ownership model. Each subsystem can deploy its economic design, allowing co-owners to translate into revenue, yields, services, access, or any form of value created by that subsystem. Thank you very much. Let's meet on the next discussion, where we're gonna dive deep into co-ownership in detail, in this, how these values, because co-ownership is your benefit. Bye.